Welcome to episode 130 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing Remy Auberjonois, who wrote and directed the feature film Bloodstripe. He has had a long career as an actor and has now turned his attention to writing and directing, so stay tuned for that. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking us on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 130. I continually build out the SYS script library. I want to thank Steve Cleary, who sent in the screenplay for Butter, and Nabi Masood, who sent in the scripts for Steve Jobs, Straight Outta Compton, and The Big Short. If you have a screenplay that you do not see listed in the SYS script library, please do email that to me. The SYS script library is completely free. We have well over 1,000 screenplays in the library, many hit movies, award winners, and television shows. All the scripts are in PDF format, so you can download them and read them on whatever device you typically use. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/library. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide, how to write a professional logline and query letter, how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. A quick few words about what I'm working on. So once again, the main thing I'm working on now is pre-production for my crime action thriller screenplay, The Pinch. Shooting starts July 9th. I'm on the final countdown to get everything in order. At this point, there are just a million little small things to do. I got to meet with my first AD, go over the final shooting schedule. I got to meet with the actors, go over stuff, wardrobe, hair, that kind of stuff. I've got to meet with the stunt coordinator to talk through some of the small stunts that are in the film. I've got to talk with my DP, get that some of that stuff organized. I've still got a few roles left to cast, and I've got a few more positions to fill on the crew. But that's basically moving along nicely. Last week, again, just trying to move the ball forward a little bit. I went to the prop house, got the props, some of the props in order so that we can rent those. Mainly that's the stuff that, you can't just get typically. So it's like fake guns, fake police holsters, a fake knife, a prop knife, that kind of stuff. I'm going to be renting. Met with an actor, my lead actor last week, talked through some of the roles. He had some cool ideas about, just kind of how to fill in some of the backstory on the actor. Some interesting stuff that might help sort of color what kind of clothes he would wear, what kind of look he's going to have. So those kinds of things, those are great for the story. It's great for making the project better, but they are very, very time consuming. So at this point, I'm just really on a time crunch trying to get everything done. As I said, there's just 1,000,001 tiny little things that I've got to kind of get in order. So needless to say, I'm very busy trying to get everything going, but the shoot date is still pretty well locked up, July 9th, which is a Saturday. I will be the first day of shooting, and then we'll go to July 29th. So 3 weeks, 5 days a week for 3 weeks. Anyway, that's what I'm working on. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing writer, director, and also actor Remy Auberjonois. Here is the interview. Welcome, Remy, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks a lot for having me on. I'm happy to talk to you.
So let's dig into your latest film, Bloodstripe. Maybe to start out, you can give us a quick pitch or logline for the film.
Yeah, the film is a dramatic psychological thriller about a female Marine veteran who returns from Afghanistan and finds it impossible to return to her domestic life. She flees to the North Woods to seek solace and solitude, but discovers that she carries the burdens of war within her. It's a sort of psychological unraveling based on the trauma she carries.
Okay, okay. So where did this idea come from?
Actually, it came a little bit cart before the horse. We decided where we wanted to make a movie, and we decided, when I say we, the lead actress in the film is also my co-writer and really the co-creative force behind the film, who also happens to be a person I'm married to. We decided that we wanted to make a film there, and I really wanted to focus in on a single character which she would play because I knew that I would have access to her. And it came organically out of that because we did some research and we discovered that a lot of people serve who live in the Iron Range of Minnesota. There are a lot of service members that come out of there. That's how they get education. That's how some of them leave that area. That's how they support themselves. And we felt that kind of character would be really suited to her strengths as an actor. And in doing some research about that experience, the story came organically, and we tailored it for her and for the places we knew we could get. Even down to, I know that this guy owns a plane. He'll take us up and we can get some aerial shots. Mm-hmm. We have these locations and what can happen there. It was really based on what was doable. And in cataloging that stuff, we discovered the movie.
Okay. And so let's back up just a second. So this location was in Minnesota. Is that what you said?
Yeah, it's northern Minnesota. We shot primarily on Lake Vermilion, which is about an hour south of the Canadian border. Okay. And we were based at a summer camp, Camp Vermilion, where it was really about what was doable. It's a great location for living, working, shooting, and as a base camp to access the whole lake. Mm-hmm. And the lake is really a character in the film too. It sort of represents her psyche at times. It's the Iron Range of northern Minnesota.
Okay, and how were you aware of this? Was this someplace you guys just went on vacation and you thought, this would be a great spot for a film? How did you kind of become aware of this location?
Yeah, her family has had a place up there for many years, and her grandmother actually, and this is another way into the story, her grandmother lived up there year-round alone later on in her life. And so there was a sort of family history of hardy women living alone up in this area. But her family, we summer up there. Her family has a place, and we knew we wanted to spend time there, and we thought, well, why not combine that with our making our movie?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not sure that I'm entirely going to have insights on selling the screenplay because it was such a self-generated project, which we then had to sell other people on the idea of in order to finance the film, the making of the film.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm curious. I mean, there's good and bad shooting outside of L.A. I mean, the good is all that stuff you said, like the guy with an airplane is willing to take you up for free. If you wanted someone in L.A., they would want a lot of money for it. But then the flip side of that is the bad is you have to fly a lot of people in because there's not typically a lot of great actors or great cinematographers just sitting around in Minnesota. How did you handle that sort of balancing act?
Well, I have to actually differ. There are tremendous actors in Minnesota, and there's a great crew base. Okay. I'm going to boost Minnesota a bit now. Certainly not. We did fly in most of our principal cast, and we flew in our crew heads. So yes, my cinematographer, our costume designer, our production designer, we flew them in, and the principal cast, we flew in. However, Minnesota has really good incentives, and this area in Minnesota has doubly good incentives because there's a local incentive that goes on top of the state incentive. So by shooting in this area, we got 45% back on certain qualified expenses. So we were able to bring crews from the Twin Cities and offset certain costs.
Mm-hmm.
So it's from a protoserial point of view.
Yeah.
It balanced itself out that way. And there's a lot of production that happens there actually because it's home to, I think, 25 Fortune 500 companies. So there's a lot of commercial and corporate production that happens. There's a lot of agencies that are based there. So, it's one of those things where leaving LA, yes, it was an away job even for the people from the Twin Cities. But as a location job, there were certain benefits that that made it pretty appealing, actually.
Okay. So no, that's a great answer, and that's interesting to hear. So let's talk a little bit about the writing process. You mentioned that you collaborated with your wife on this. So maybe just take us through the process. You've kind of brought us up. You had the location. You started to just kind of form the basic idea. Then what sort of happened? What was the next step? Did you do an extensive outline? Did you just dive into final draft and start writing the script? What was that process like?
Yeah, we did a real outlining process. The film is, as I said, it's an exploration of a psychological state. In what we hope is a real gripping, mysterious, but gripping, at times gripping narrative. And again, it is very mysterious. But so some of it was images that came to us in dreams. Some of it was, how are we going to literalize this feeling that we want to get at, this kind of paranoia, this kind of sense of danger? What is it to be a woman alone in solitude in this beautiful place, but carrying this sense of awareness and danger, and that the world is not a safe place? And how do we literalize that? So the writing process was sort of, and then also applying it to locations that we knew we had. Well, what could happen here? What would be the reality of what would happen here? Oh, it's a summer camp, but we don't want to deal with campers, so it's after the camp is closed. And what's that like? And how does that inform the story? And we did a real timeline of note cards where we had anything from an image or a line or an emotional beat, or a piece of music, and we just sort of started to get all of those down and built a structure that way, and then that allowed us to move it all around. We did it pretty analog style at first, and because we were working at home, we were able to take over a whole room in our apartment and devote it to this sort of collage of note cards in that way, which then became scenes, which then became about a 40-page outline, which we used to appeal to a musician whose music we really wanted to use. That was we had a sort of deadline that we wanted to meet him and get it to him. So that spurred us into like a sort of frenzy of writing the outline, which got it to a 40-page descriptive form, and then that was the basis for the script.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And let's talk a little bit about writing with a partner. I've had many different writing partners, and, there's always those moments where you don't agree, and they're always handled a little bit differently. So I'm always curious to hear how writing teams work. What is that process like when you guys have, maybe disagreements? How do you resolve those types of issues?
The added thing is that we're married, so you're not necessarily always as polite as you might be to someone who is less intimate. So that was a challenge to maintain a degree of distance. But when we would disagree, usually we would hear the sense from one side or the other. And there was never a moment when either one of us dug in our heels and said, yes, or I'm walking. And for the most part, sometimes those disagreements as you're writing, they have to do with the gut. And sometimes it was just whoever's gut really seemed the strongest, then you just trust that other person's gut. And then a lot of times I found that there was rationale behind it. And you may not even understand the rationale at first, and then when you start to defend your point of view, then you start to refine your rationale, or your rationale unravels, and you realize, oh, yeah, never mind. You know, never mind what I said before. As I am talking about it more now, it doesn't make as much sense. You know, or yes, emotionally, I understand why the character would do that, or I understand why we need that scene there because my conviction that it made more sense before this other scene has stopped making sense to me as I've explained it. It sort of just happened that way. We had disagreements for sure, but usually if one of us felt really right about something, we trusted each other.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. So let's talk about your development process a little bit. Once you started to, I guess, this 40-page sort of descriptive treatment of it, and then even the first draft or rough draft, who did you send that to get notes? And, do you have any advice on that process?
Yeah, we know some writers. Certainly, both of us have been professional actors, so we know a lot of people who do this. We sent it to that musician who we had originally reached out to. We sent it to my father, who we were also writing a part for. We sent it to some writer friends of ours. Eventually, when we did connect with the producers, we continued to do development drafts with them. And actually, I should say, we started out trying to find somebody else to write it. At first, we came up with the idea and the sort of central spine of a story. We conceived of it, and then we wanted to have one of our scriptwriter friends do it. And for one reason or another, the couple of people that we approached weren't available, couldn't do it, and so we just started ourselves. But so we had a few trusted people. An editor friend of ours, a couple of playwright friends of ours, and then the two I mentioned before. And then we did a reading of it, which was kind of an introductory reading in Minnesota, well before we started it, and that was just for us to hear it for ourselves, and that helped us a lot too. And we had a questionnaire that we attached to the people who saw that reading.
Yeah. So let's just talk for a minute. You've now got a script that you like. You start sending it out. What are those first steps to getting producers attached and ultimately getting this thing financed? Maybe you can just talk about that briefly.
Well, I learned as I went that there was a lot I didn't know, and at first. The goal was, when we first approached it, was we're going to make a micro budget film, and we'll sort of we'll rope in somebody to produce it who maybe hasn't done it before, and but as we were developing it and writing it, and I came to a point where now we're going to make this film, and we want to make it, and we were doing it on a fairly short timeline from the time we conceived of the film to the time we actually finished shooting the film. Was about 10 months. So I knew I wanted to make it in this one window of time for various reasons, and I was pushing to do that. And I was going to go out for financing myself, direct to high net worth individuals and family, and I was going to make it happen. Now, in the lead up to that push, to me saying I'm going to go try to finance this, I knew that I needed to make a budget. I said, okay, now I have this script, which I've made as spare as possible according to as many resources I know I can marshal, but I don't really know what it's going to take to make it. And I connected with, actually just a friend of mine mentioned that her husband could do a budget for us. He likes to help people, and he produces huge movies. This is the guy who ended up being our executive producer, one of our executive producers, along with a woman named Stephanie Dillon. But G. Mac Brown, who produces big movies, he took a look at it and said, "Oh, I like the script. It's so mysterious. I really am interested in it." And he made a budget which was way bigger than I had ever conceived of. But he said, "Listen, I make movies at a level at which this is as low as I can conceive of making a film, but I have these friends who have produced films at different budget levels, and they work more in independent film." And he connected us with a company called Tandem Pictures, and we had a really good meeting with Skylar Weiss and Julie Christeas of Tandem Pictures, and they came on as producers. We were still the driving engines behind the finances, and we really had the instinct that we would be able to get the money in Minnesota, which is more or less what we ultimately did. We ended up getting financing, full financing from one individual, actually, which then fell through, and we ended up having to cobble it together from other people. But in terms of finding producers, it was in the same way as the script was very organic. The process by which people came to it was very organic. It was, this person had this friend, knew GMAC, and then GMAC connected us with them, and they liked it, and we just were going. So it was a fairly unusual situation in that sense.
Yeah. And it sounds like just you being a working actor for, a number of years, that was probably the initial step. You had all these contacts, correct?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, I mean, I have relationships, and I have some degree of credibility, and people, I mean, I don't know if that's earned, but I think people took it face value, and then people did respond to the script. Ultimately, I found that on some level people are investing in you, but I also felt that it became much bigger than me, and much bigger than Kate, my partner. Yeah. It really drew energy and resources to it, and so the people who were involved were incredibly enthusiastic. And I think a film like this couldn't have happened without that. But we also, we went. I like to say we're going to the yes. There were plenty of people who didn't give us money. There were plenty of people who didn't return my call. There were plenty of people who didn't read the script, or if they read the script, I don't know, and maybe they didn't like the script because they never got back to me. Because we did send it out, but it takes one yes. From each area, a yes on the money gets the yeses going. A yes on some money starts the yeses going. A yes on an actor saying yes. A crew person signing on that other people respect. That all starts to build energy towards it.
So how can people see Bloodstripe? Do you know the release schedule?
We don't have a release schedule yet. Right now we have a world premiere at the Los Angeles Film Festival and a second screening. The world premiere sold out, but we have a second screening June 7th in Culver City in Los Angeles at 4 p.m., the ArcLight Theaters. And then we're doing our East Coast premieres at the Provincetown Film Festival in Cape Cod. We've got screenings June 16th and June 18th. And we're taking it from there.
Perfect. Well, Remy, I really appreciate you coming on and talking with me today. Good luck with the film. I really thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Nice talking to you, man.
A quick plug for the SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. It's a really economical way to get a high-quality professional evaluation on your screenplay. When you buy our 3-pack, you get evaluations at just $67 per script for feature films and just $55 for teleplays. All the readers have professional experience reading for studios, production companies, contests, and agencies. You can read a short bio on each reader on our website, and you can pick the one who you think is the best fit for your script. Turnaround time is usually just a few days, but rarely more than a week. The readers will evaluate your script on 6 key factors: concept, characters, structure, marketability, tone, and overall craft, which includes formatting, spelling, and grammar. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend, which should help you roughly understand where your script might rank if you were to submit it to a production company or agency. We provide analysis on features and television scripts. We also do proofreading without any analysis. We will also look at a treatment or outline and give you the same analysis on it. So if you're looking to vet some of your projects, this is a great way to do it. We will also write a logline and synopsis for you. You can add this service to the analysis, or you can simply purchase this service as a standalone product. As a bonus, if your script gets a recommend from a reader, you get a free email and fax blast to my list of industry contacts. This is the exact same blast service I use myself to promote my own scripts, and it's the same service I sell on the website. It's a great way to get your script into the hands of producers who are looking for material. So if you want a professional evaluation of your screenplay at a very reasonable price, check out www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. In the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing Stefan Bugaj and Justin Sloan, who run the Creative Writing Career podcast. Stefan and Justin both have worked in the video game industry as writers, and in fact, Stefan has actually hired writers in the video game industry. So it's an interesting talk about what video game companies are looking for in terms of writing background and writing experience to get hired on as a video game writer. So if you ever considered this as a career choice, this is a great episode to listen to. In addition, they have also written a book recently where they interviewed a bunch of very successful screenwriters. We talk about that as well, some of the lessons that they've learned from interviewing all of these working screenwriters. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. To wrap things up, I just want to touch on something from today's interview with Remy. I've mentioned this before on the podcast. One thing I've noticed about my own email and fax blast service is that the people who seem to have the most success from it are people who have experience in the industry. And I'm not just talking about writing experience. Any kind of experience in the industry can really help you as a writer. There have been lots of options, and I don't want to overstate this. There have been lots of options through my email and fax blast service, but in the vast majority of cases, and it's not every case, I can definitely think of a couple of instances where I don't think the people had really any experience and they were able to get an option through the email and fax blast service. But the vast majority of them, the sales and the options have come from people that have some experience. And we're not talking about tons of experience, but some experience in the industry. So it kind of becomes the question, how do you get this experience? And one of the things this sort of dovetails into is, as an example, I had an actor, I think it was maybe a year or two ago, he used my email and fax blast service, and he had never written a lot. He hadn't written a lot anyways. Maybe he had written some, but he hadn't written a lot. But he had worked as a theater actor for decades, and he wrote a script and he optioned it. And again, this kind of experience can be a great background to kind of color your writing and help you as a writer. Obviously, being an actor is a very tough profession to make work. So Remy is very lucky that he has that experience, and it is great experience, but it's not easy experience to get. And I don't necessarily want to recommend to anyone that they take up acting as a way to break in as a writer, because, being an actor is probably as hard or harder than being a writer. So you're just taking on one difficult pursuit for another. But I do think that there are probably some good jobs that would help lay the groundwork for a screenwriting career that are also fairly easy, or even if they're not easy, they're at least reasonably realistic to actually achieve, actually get one of these jobs. I keep referencing this article on the podcast. I did write an article. I'll link to it in the show notes, but I basically went and just broke down I think it was like the first 75 episodes of the podcast. I basically made a chart of who I interviewed and how they broke into the industry. And, far and away, the way people broke in was through networking. And then I actually broke networking down into subcategories. And again, the major way people broke in obviously was networking, and then the subcategory under networking was working in the industry. So that's by far, that's the most sort of tried and true way of breaking into the industry. I mean, there's definitely other ways. Obviously, I sell an email and fax blast service. That's a way. There's contests, Inktip, Blacklist. There's all these other services. But, far and away, the way most people who are successful screenwriters broke in is by working in the industry. So in most cases, when you look at what that actually means, working in the industry, it mostly means, low level PA jobs, maybe getting a job in the mailroom, working your way up, networking. And I think that's great. If you're young, if you're out of college, you don't have a lot of family obligations, by all means, move to Los Angeles and pursue that. Again, I think that's the most tried and true way. But I also understand that there's lots of people who listen to this podcast who are not in a position to do that. So I just thought it was, again, interesting. This actor that I'm talking about who used my email and fax blast service, he had worked in the theater for many years. So there's probably local opportunities, no matter where you live in the USA or anywhere in the world, there's probably local opportunities that maybe not exactly screenwriting or exactly what you want to do, but they at least can help you in some small way pursue your career as a screenwriter. They can help you build skills that will be advantageous to have as a screenwriter. As an example, when I first got to Los Angeles, me and a buddy, we just walked into, it was a very small talent agency that had sort of a literary, arm to it. And we just walked into the agency and we'd gotten a tip at a coffee house. Another guy was reading scripts for this agency. He said, yeah, just go over there and ask him. And there was essentially no pay. It was some sort of a deal. Like if you read a script that ended up selling, you would get some percentage of the agent's percent. So, there was, I guess, deferred pay, but there really, for all practical purposes, wasn't pay. But again, it was a great way to just get some experience and read a bunch of scripts and kind of get just network with this agent and talk to him and see what kind of scripts were coming in. But mainly it was a lot of reading of scripts. And I had someone email me a couple of months ago, asking about how can they get that kind of job. And it occurred to me in this day and age, when I got to LA, really, I guess email was around, but it wasn't quite as ubiquitous as it is now. So you pretty much had to be in LA if you wanted to have those types of jobs. I don't think you would anymore. I think you could probably email, and I'm not talking about CAA or the big agencies, but some of the smaller agencies that are like WGA signatory agencies, look for some of the small ones. You could probably call them or email them and just say, hey, I'm an up-and-coming screenwriter. I'd love to read scripts for you for free or for deferred pay. And I would be pretty... I'd be surprised if you were not able to get one of these types of jobs that, again, it's not going to make a lot of money, but it could be something you did at nights, read 1 or 2 scripts a week, and that could add up to some really valuable experience. I had a friend years ago who worked for a local cable access channel in a small town, in his small town. He was just running around shooting stuff that would go up on the local, city cable access channel, and he would edit it together. He did the whole production from front to back. He was a screenwriter and doing this job. And again, I think that was a great... just a great way to get some experience doing something. Again, not quite writing, but it was definitely something that can help him as an experience. I mean, that's excellent experience for anybody who is a filmmaker. And it was not high paid. It was a full-time job, and he was definitely getting paid for it. But it was not a high-paid job, but it was a cool job that he enjoyed. And as I said, I think it can really help him get some of that experience as a filmmaker. Just shooting stuff, working with the camera, understanding how all that works, really can help him as a writer. I met a guy recently who worked as a copywriter, writing ad copy. Again, I think this is excellent experience for anyone who wants to be a screenwriter. Just, in your daily work, your 9-to-5 job, if you're spending a lot of times with words and learning how to make, manipulate people's feelings and attention using words, again, I think that's great experience for a screenwriter. And going back to the cable, the guy who was shooting video for cable access shows, probably just about every small town throughout the country, and maybe in some of the small towns, maybe it's not even a full-time job. Maybe it's like a weekend job, and maybe they pay you $100 and you go out and work on Saturdays or something. But there's probably these types of small jobs that exist. The cable access job, probably just about every small town in the USA and maybe even the world has something like that. again, probably not super high paid, so it's not going to be super competitive, but it's probably something that you could get. Writing ad copy, if you learn how to be a copywriter, writing ad copy, I mean, nowadays you can get those types of jobs from anywhere. As long as you have an internet connection, you can pretty much do that from anywhere. Again, you're probably, to break into these things, you're going to have to work for free for a little bit, or build out a portfolio of stuff that you've done. These jobs are not, copywriting is if you're very good at it, is actually very highly paid. So there probably would be some putting in some dues on that. But again, I think that there is some real synergy with being a screenwriter. Even what I'm doing here with selling your screenplay, there's quite a bit of networking I'm doing with producers, producing the monthly newsletter that goes out. I've started to interact with producers. I've started to have, writer, director, producers on the podcast. And there's definitely some back and forth there where I'm meeting people and networking with people. So again, it's, it can kind of double as kind of a day job. Think about that, what else you can do. And again, these are just a couple of ideas as I was just preparing to record this podcast, just a couple ideas that I just threw out there, but there's probably, millions of other ideas, but think through this, what is your day job, and can you get some sort of a day job that at least in some small way pushes you closer to a screenwriting career, gives you some of this experience that could be useful as a screenwriter. Because as I said, sort of circling back to what I started with, I can tell you from seeing who are the people that have success with my email and fax blast, it's always people that have some experience. And again, it's not like experience as screenwriters. They've sold lots of scripts before. Not necessarily, but an actor who's worked in the theater for many years, who kind of has read obviously a ton of scripts, a ton of plays, understands how the sort of it all works, and understands, how to write dialogue because he's an actor and he's done it. Those kinds of types of jobs. Copywriters, people who have worked in newspaper as journalists, those kinds of people have had success with the email and fax blast. And so I just kind of think you've got to get this experience if you're doing something that's just wholly unrelated to screenwriting, and none of your sort of 9-to-5 job is helping you with your screenwriting. I think that's potentially a mistake. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.